If you've been looking for a way of making your podcast stand out, or maybe making an episode extra special, then live podcasting could be the way forward. And when we talk about live podcasting, we're not talking about streaming live over the internet. We're talking about actually being in a studio on stage in front of your fans. In this episode, we're talking to Jeff Revilla, and he shares everything you need to know about giving your listeners an unforgettable experience. Jeff runs a live podcast studio, Poduty, based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he gives podcasters the tools they need to host and record an episode in front of an intimate audience of fans. And in this episode, we cover: why should a podcaster consider hosting a live episode? Where to start with planning a live episode? How to make a live episode extra special and memorable for your listeners. How Jeff is making live podcasting possible even for podcasters without a budget. What's coming next in the world of live podcasting, and much more. If you're considering hosting a live podcast, or you just want to get a bit of a look into this growing format that's helping podcasters stand out from a crowd, then this is for you. Jeff Revilla, he runs a live podcast studio in Western Pennsylvania called Poduty, and it's a one-of-a-kind live podcast studio for professional and aspiring podcasters and community theatre that hosts in-person and virtual events and experiences. So I thought it would be good if we could talk a little bit about live podcasting, because I know it's something that can be very valuable to help podcasters stand out, and it's maybe something that our listeners may or may not have ever thought of, or they might be interested in knowing sort of how live podcasting works. So we're not talking about just like streaming a podcast live here. We're talking about actual live performance of the podcast to an audience, to a live audience. Could you tell us a little bit about like what live podcasting is all about, who it's for, and why a podcaster might want to host a live show?
Yeah, it's really about full immersion. When you listen to a podcast, maybe on your morning commute while you're out for a walk, it's just you and usually the host in your earbuds. And it almost feels like you're a fly on the wall and you're part of some conversation maybe you should or shouldn't be part of, but you're there and you're immersed in it. And just audio has that way of really connecting you with the host. I wanted to recreate that in real life. And so I keep thinking about this idea of how can we bring that feeling, that immersion, to a small theater space. And when you look around, if you look behind me, the people in the audience are never more than 3 rows away from the stage. So we're kind of wrapped around the stage, kind of like a boomerang shape, and the room gets so dark and only the stage is lit, and you can't help but be pulled into that stage. When you're sitting there, the only thing in front of you is this lit up stage, and it really recreates that same feeling that you get when you're listening to a podcast by yourself. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that feeling that so many people love. So many people connect with audio on a different way, but we're recreating that in a real time. And we're doing that for, not just interview podcasts. I do a trivia show podcast. We have sports shows coming in. We've done fundraisers. We can do corporate events. So we're able to use the stage in multiple different ways for multiple different purposes and still give that immersion factor to it. So it's very unique in that respect. But it's not just for the people sitting in front of us, too. This is all designed to not only be recorded for the podcaster to give them their next episode for release, but this gets live streamed. And what we end up happening, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the show or movie Star Trek, but if you remember, they go to the bottom of the ship and they say, "Scotty, beam me up." And there's this little room where they can transport from the ship to planets. And so this stage really becomes like this portal, because you're not only entertaining the people in front of you, you can entertain people online, but the people online can actually come onto the stage. We have a television connection. They can click the link, join on the stage. We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so they could be in California or Canada or, even across the seas. And they can be there interacting on the stage with the audience in person, asking questions, and the audience can even ask them questions. So this stage really becomes a portal that we can open to anyone. And that, that's one of the things we're trying to build, is how do we take this immersion idea and apply it to, different niches in podcasting, different industries, different sectors of the market, even education and conventions and conferences. We're trying to do all that in this small, intimate setting, and then do it at scale by the time we start live.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you've got interview podcasts on there. you've got solo podcasts. What kind of do these podcasters generally do like every episode live? Do they have a specific live podcast, or are they just doing like special episodes every now and then?
Yeah, one thing we've realized early on is for a podcaster, there is so much credibility and so much power in saying, hey, join us on our next episode. We're going to be live at the Poduty Podcast Theater at downtown Tarentum. We're doing a special live show. So saying live from the main stage on a podcast is a great feeling for the podcaster, for the listeners. It adds a whole nother level of credibility. So what we're trying to do is, I wouldn't mind having regular shows. I do my trivia show regularly from there, but typically we're booking one-offs, and we're trying to figure this out still. This is a very new concept. We've only been open a few months now, and we're testing different concepts, different ideas. Eventually, a couple house shows. You come in every Wednesday night, and that's just where they record. That'll be great. Currently, we're booking like the one-off acts right now. Like, hey, try it out. Let's see what you think, and then we'll build on.
Yeah, and I guess you could do a kind of special format for that show, and if you were taking the time to go to the venue and invite people, then you would need that little bit of extra time to promote it first. So in terms of like getting people there, how do you find that podcasters are generally promoting these shows? Are they taking a few weeks to promote it on their podcast? Are they sort of paying to promote it? Do you do promotion as well for shows?
Yeah, it takes time. This is a newer form of entertainment. People know when you want to go see music, you might go to a local bar or pub. You might go to a theater or an arena. That's where you go see music. If you want to see comedy, you go to a comedy club. If you're still checking out books, you may go to the library. People know how to do the things that they want to do to get their goal. Listening to live podcasting is a very new concept. It's people take a minute to really understand. Like, wait, I listened to that on my car. Why do I got to go to a place? I don't get it. I don't go to live podcasts. And while you do see that with larger entertainers and comedians, you do see them touring with their podcasts and filling arenas. So I think that we're going to trickle down to need places that are middle places for smaller podcasters. So what we do is we give them the space, we give them the time that they're going to do their show, and most of the marketing falls on them. We want them to be a part of this. We want them to invest in it. We have a calendar of events. We promote the events as well, but we want this to be their event too. So we want them to, because we don't charge anything with this. So we'll get into the business model. There's no fee for them. So I don't want this to be a passive thing where they just, oh, it's free, I can just come do it. I want them to be heavily invested in the date, in the event. I want them to come structure it. I want them to come do some run-throughs and really put on a quality, usually 90-minute event in total is a good exchange for the ticket price. And I want them to be a part of it and be a part of the promotion. So they will do, they'll announce it on their podcast. They will do some paid spots. They'll do some events on Facebook. And,
it makes sense because they've got that trust with their audience already. I think it's harder to sell the idea of, going to a podcast event to, someone who's never heard of a podcast before. But yeah, we're not at a scale.
We're not at a scale yet where people will check out the calendar and like, oh, I see that they're doing a comedy news show on Thursday night. Let's go check it out. Right now, we're still in the phase where it's you're influenced by the people you follow phase. So like if I'm doing a trivia show, I say, come join me, Thursday night, we're going to do 2 games of live trivia. You can play on your phone. Then those people who already know me and trust me are going to come to the theater, not because of the theaters having live trivia. So it's still in that word of mouth ramping up phase.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think with podcasting, especially, it's with the sort of very niche topics and, like aligning with the values of whichever podcast you listen to, it's a little bit more of a sell to get people to go. Whereas with a music show, it might, someone might be willing to just give it a go, even if they've never heard of the band. But yeah, I've been to see a live show, like a comedy show podcast a few years ago. And it's really cool. It's like a different experience because I think with music or others, theatre and things, it's kind of expected that it's going to be live. But with a podcast, it's a very intimate medium. I'd been listening to this podcast for years, and it almost feels like, it's just you and the podcast host sometimes. So when you go to this place and you've got all these other fans there, hundreds of other fans, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, just like it is, great for the show to say, hey, we're live from the main stage, come see us. there's a whole nother experience from the audience. Like you're mentioning, like it's almost like you're this thing that you've been engaged with and listening to one-on-one and, drawing your own conclusions in your mind and visualizing maybe what they look like. When you get to a live show and you finally meet the people behind the microphone and you see them and you interact with them, you can do a Q&A with them. That levels up that relationship that you have with that show exponentially. You'll never get that experience just downloading week after week after week after week. But when you meet them and you shake their hand and hey, thank you. I was listening to that. I was having a rough day and it was so funny. I just forgot about all my problems, and you get to have that interaction and thank them in person for what they've been delivering. They never know that. I mean, the hosts never get that kind of feedback in real life. So to go to a place, meet some fans, get some real-time feedback, see how you're affecting lives and making people smile sometimes, educating people. Maybe you gave somebody a tip that they turned into a $10,000 a month business. Who knows? But you can have those types of interactions, especially with super fans. When you start doing
you're
live
making a
events.
point. Like they want to speak to their fans as well. It's the same for the podcaster. They want to hear from their fans who they don't really get to hear much from. It's not like going to a big music event and the artist pops up and then they're disappeared again. I think with these sort of smaller intimate podcast shows, I mean, I go to the podcast show in London and they do a lot of sort of little live ones, and you can just talk to them after. You can, and they're I mean, in my experience anyway, they've always been happy to just chat to people and learn what makes them listen and so on.
Yeah, I mean, most podcasters have been doing this for years for free. So that, to go to a place and get, to get feedback, that means the world to them. I've been recording this for 2 or 3 years, and then I just met somebody on the street, and they're like, "Thank you, that was so amazing." You don't know what you just did to that podcaster. You lit up his life, for weeks. He'll talk about that interaction, for a while. It's those connections, because the audience member already has such a deep connection with the host, and the host has already been sharing so much with the audience. There's like this unmatched connection, and once you meet in real life, then you can share ideas and feedback, and it just be thankful. You can be thankful for each other. The podcaster is thankful for the listener, and the listener is thankful for everything the podcaster has given to them.
So if you take us back a little bit, when you started the studio, was it specifically built for podcasts? What's your background in relation to this? And was there a specific sort of trigger that made you think it's time to ramp up on live podcasting?
Yeah, I fell in love with podcasting in 2006, 2007. I had one of the first color iPods. Even I have it somewhere. It's engraved. Happy Father's Day. I got it as a gift, and I started my first show 2011, and I didn't really understand what I was doing. But in 2015, some people, you either remember this era or not, there was a service called Blab. And Blab was around. It was the first 4-in-the-box live streaming service that had this great social element to it. And what would happen is you'd go live, and within 2 minutes, Blab would just flood your show with 30 to 40 people, and you'd have an audience almost immediately. It was your good job to keep it, but they would definitely give you the chance to be successful live. And Blab grew, and it grew rapidly, and it eventually folded, and it left a big hole in a lot of people. So people who were there for Blab in 2015, they know exactly the feeling that I'm talking about, because when it went away, that feeling of connection, that feeling of community, that feeling of not being, erased by an algorithm or, relying on a social media platform to deliver you on, Blab did that for you. It brought you an audience that you could entertain. And so when that went away, I spent years, trying Google Hangouts and YouTube Live and Appear In and Hop In, all these different platforms to try to bring that feeling back. And eventually I said, well, what if I can't do that anymore from my house like we did with Blab? But what if I could build a theater that fit inside the back of my sedan, and I could take it anywhere and just set up in a park or, alongside a river and where there's a trail, and just pop up and do a pop-up theater podcast. That was the first idea. So I built it. I have a photo. You can see I got the speakers, the mixer. I had a podium I would take around to that all fit in the back seat of my car, and I could do a live show. And then I started to book events, and we booked our first event for a live show at a theater in March 30th, 2020. We're going to do free tacos and, just have a huge party and do live shows. And then 2 weeks before that, the world shuts down for the pandemic. So my first show got canceled, and I was like, oh man. And I just kept thinking about like, okay, now we're stuck in our houses, and I want to do this concept of online community, online podcasting. And I want it to be more than just interviews. I want more. I want a connection and have interaction. And so I thought of this concept of, well, what if I can't afford a theater or a hotel to run a conference. What if I wasn't limited by the size of the place? What if, like, even if I used my basement, I could bring in a small audience in my basement and live stream it, and I'm not limited by the capacity of that room. I'm only limited by my imagination and how far I can reach. I could live stream that show to an audience, and I called it the Infinite Seat Theater was the concept. That was the original concept, and I presented that at a conference called Podfest in 2020, and great reaction, great feedback. Like, okay, you're onto something here. And the real catalyst was, they asked me like, why'd you do this now? I turned 48, and I've been thinking about this for 7 years, and it's been in my head, and I kept visualizing it different ways, and every time I thought about it, it would just light this fire in me. I said, I got to know, before I leave the earth, is this a real idea? Is this a thing or not? So I gave myself a 2-year window, kind of like that half-life crisis, not a midlife crisis, but I said, by the time I'm 50, I got 2 years. I want to know, is this a great idea, or am I just the only one on earth that's thinking about this? And I signed the lease. My birthday was June 12th, and we opened June 13th. So, I have a 2-year clock ticking, and I'm going through it. We're doing all kinds of different things and ramping this thing up and getting it going. And I'll know by the time I'm 50, was this a good idea? Great. I'll build on it. If not, it's out of my system. And now I know for sure, I don't have to do it anymore. And it's also a calculated risk. I've been planning this for years, and I've done the numbers and run the math, and it also, all that made sense too. I didn't just pull the trigger and say, let's do this because I'm getting old. The math, as we say sometimes, the math works out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if anyone's watching for people watching on video, you can see a sort of still behind Jeff of the podcast, of the studio itself, the stage and everything. Yeah, it looks really cool. It's intimate. You've got the lighting there. You've got the 2 seats on stage and the mic. Are you finding that podcasters are doing anything special, like if they have an interview show, for example, to get people invested and to get people excited about going to the live show? Are they doing anything special for that show? Like, are they sort of bringing on a special guest a lot of the time? Or is it just, an episode, but it's live and that's sort of enough to get people excited?
Yeah, it's a little bit of each. Like people do want to bring their A game to the live stage. So they will book a guest that they maybe been trying to get, somebody that they really want to influence or really impress upon. So they will bring a little bit higher caliber of guests, and you'll get them. I think you're also asking about how do they get the word out too?
Yeah, like how do they get people excited? Like, are there some ways that if they're doing a live show, they can think, right, this time we're going to bring on like an extra special guest, or we're going to do a panel, or we're going to, I don't know, is there any other kind of formats or things that people can do?
Yeah, I like to do a walkthrough a week before. So I always encourage, I said, hey, let me know when you're in town or around. I'm only a few minutes away. I will come down. We shoot promos. We can record something from the stage. We upcoming next week. I'll be here, and we'll shoot these little short promos. They even come down when I'm not there and record in front of the building. So they'll record a promo in front of it, and they use that to kind of ramp up and build up. And I really want to. My goal is to make sure they produce a great show. So that's why we do these like walkthroughs a week before. I want to give them notes and pointers and say, hey, you usually do this. That's a great segment. If you did it like this, it'll play better to a live audience. So we'll do a walkthrough and give tips and bounce ideas off each other, and then give them the promo to be able to release to their
that's
audience.
Nice that they get like sort of a little bit of training effectively. Yeah, rather than just sort of turning up on the day and hoping it goes well. If you're going to get everyone there, then you need to, like you say, bring your A game. Cool.
Yeah, we do get people that phone it in. They say they call it phoning it in.
Yeah.
You just show up, do the thing, get out.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the pricing structure before. I'm sure it's different for all locations, but for Poduty, let's say we got a podcast listening, they may be starting to get a little bit of traction, a couple of thousand listeners a month, but they're still thinking, I'm not really making any money out of this. How I'm not going to be able to afford to do a live event. How do you do it to sort of help make it doable for them?
Yeah, my goal is butts and seats. I want turnover. I want to bring people in, get them out, get them in, get them out. So the structure that we have, and the one I'm probably going to stick with for a while, is I don't want any risk to the creators, to the podcasters. I want them to come in here, do a show, and let's build on it every time. We'll build a little bit more, build a little bit more. So what I do is I don't charge them anything to use the stage. I don't ask for a minimum amount of ticket sales. I don't say, hey, you got to guarantee 20 sales or else you're not going to make any money. And when they say, okay, let's try it, that's a good value proposition right there, no charge. I said, great, I'm going to build you an event landing page. I'm going to sell the tickets for you. I'm going to facilitate all that. I'm going to record you when you're on the stage. We'll live stream it if you want. We can just record it if you just want audio, video recording for later. I'm going to give you back the recording. I don't take any ownership over this. It's not my property. This is your event, your show. If you want to share it, great. If you tag us, that'd be really nice. I'd appreciate it if hey, this is where we were. That's kind of like, that's my only little tiny ask. And then at the end of the night, say goodbye, do your Q&As if you want, whatever you want to do as part of your event. At the end of the night, we'll sit down together. I'll go through all the numbers. Everything's online, right? I print out, here's the tickets that were sold. Here's where you comp people. And what we do is we just split the door at the end of the night. It's 50-50. If you sell, 20 tickets at $10, you're going to walk away with $100, for producing a 1-hour show, which most podcasters don't make $100 in a month. So if you can do 20 tickets for $10 and we split that 50-50, $100 to get your show recorded, and to have your next episode ready, and to have a live event, and you get $100. That's a very good deal for the podcaster to walk away with at the end of the night.
Yeah. So at the very least, they're sort of paid for their time, but also they're coming away with an episode that they can put out there that they don't have to record for a week. Oh.
Yeah, it's like a triple win-win-win.
Nice.
For the podcast.
So let's say a podcaster listening is thinking of doing a live event. I know the process will be a little bit different depending on where they live, if they have access to your studio but just from sort of what you do and your expertise, what are the first 3 to 5 steps or whatever it is to get started? Which stage comes first? Is it getting in touch with you? Is it planning an episode? And from planning stage to actually doing the event?
Yeah, reach out. I'll spend an hour talking to people. I'll tell you exactly how I do this. I love this so much that I'm so passionate about it. If you want to do one of these in your town, and that would be the greatest most flattering thing to me is if you copied this business model. I'd love it. But if you want to start to do your own show, I'll take an hour with you. We'll sit down. We can do a Zoom I'm a StreamYard guy, so I'll pay too much for my live streaming service on StreamYard. And we'll go through step by step. We'll look at your show. We'll see what strengths it has. We'll see what aligns great with a live stage. And we'll put something together. If you think it's a great idea, we'll move forward. And we'll start to book a show. We can do some walkthroughs and get it moving. That's just the kind of, I want to make sure, it has to be great for both of us. I want to make sure I'm delivering to the audience, and I want to make sure you're happy with the product. I want you to be happy with the end result, that you produced the best show you could for that stage on that night, and you're walking away excited. Because anybody who's been on a stage, that feeling you get when you walk off a stage. You are juiced. You are pumped up when you get off of a live performance. It's a really unlike any other feeling out there. And you'll have that experience. You'll have the recording now, and we'll build upon that. Maybe for your next one.
And how long does it normally take? So, I know podcasters, they sometimes maybe, for me as well, they don't leave enough time to record and produce and release even a standard episode, let alone a live show. How long should they be planning this in advance before the release?
I say a minimum of 6 weeks. 6 weeks is because you have episodes coming out. Usually you're 2 or 3 weeks behind your release from where you're recording. So depending on your release schedule, a minimum is 6 weeks. If it's something you just want to try on a Monday or a Tuesday, a slower night, we can try something next week. I'm not against, experimenting and, hey, is this a thing? Let's see if this works. That's totally fine. I'm okay if you sell 0 tickets, if it's going to lead to something else. Like, we'll test and experiment and try things early in the week when there's nobody there. And then we'll build that so that we can build your show towards a weekend show.
And then finally, what are your sort of future plans for expanding the studio? And do you see any kind of changes or evolution within the live podcasting space that you need to adapt to over 20?
Yeah, again, for 2 years, I'm going to be at 40 seats in person, and I can live stream to 1,000. So I'm not really limited by the capacity. But at some point, I do expect, 40 seats to be a regularly full capacity. Like, as we grow and more people understand this and more people come, more and more times in the next 2 years, this place will be filled on every event. So I do expect probably to move to a larger space if it's successful in 2 years. I do see a lot of these popping up, and I've seen a couple iterations, like maybe in the back of a library or small bars or coffee shops, but nothing fully dedicated to live podcasting in this capacity, like in an intimate setting. So, but everybody I talk to is like, oh, wait a second, like this is something new. And when I go over the math and when I go over, the value of an in-person listen versus the value of somebody who downloaded that's anonymous, it's literally 500 to 1,000 times greater to try to bring 10 people to a studio than it is to try to get them to download. And that's probably a subject for another conversation. But I see these popping up everywhere, and I'd love to network, have like a little group of small podcast theaters that we can plug in podcasters. Like, hey, I'm going to do a 5-city tour this year. Great. We know Pittsburgh, Ohio, Kentucky, Florida. I can plug you into this network of small podcast theaters, and boom, your tour is booked. So that's really where I'd like to see smaller podcasters be able to travel and support themselves doing fun little live shows all over the country.
Yeah, I love it. It's making me want to go and see a live podcast. I wish I had, like a 40-seat studio near me, because that's like such an intimate and memorable experience, it sounds like. Cool. Okay, well, thanks again, Jeff. And people can go to Poduty, so poduty.com, and you're also on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else you'd like to send people if they want to have a word with you?
No, I'm most active on LinkedIn. Connect with me through Poduty.com. Send me an email. It's just my name. It's Jeff@Poduty.com. Actually, just Jeff@Poduty.com. And love to start a conversation with you. And even if you're just inquisitive, even if you just want to know what I need more information, you didn't cover enough today, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you and share ideas.
All right.
Well,
thanks again. I think that must be very interesting to a lot of people who haven't, really dived into the world of live podcasting before. And I've definitely learned some things as well. So thanks again, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next time with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting.